Greetings. Welcome to Dr. Neal's Spiritual Awakening to Non-Duality. This is Dr. Connie Zweig, and I'll be interviewing my husband who lives in spiritual awakening. You may have heard about this or read about it, but you may not know someone who lives it day to day. We'll be exploring how non-duality developed in Dr. Neal as I've observed it over 25 years, and as he directly experiences it every day. Each podcast will explore a different theme. We look forward to you joining us. Greetings. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to explore morality, partly because many of us are disturbed by the immorality we see all around us. The sexist and racist behavior and speech, the xenophobic and homophobic behavior, the talk of vengeance and retribution. And we want to explore this in the context of the evolution of consciousness. So the main point from our point of view is that morality is different in different levels of consciousness. And Dr. Neal is going to explore that in the framework that we've been using in the podcast. So I hope it's helpful to you.
Okay, so what brings this up? Brings up that people are looking at gurus, teachers, priests, politicians, and seeing lack of moral behavior, sexually, financially, power-based. And so that's what brings up the subject. And how does this interplay with consciousness? Well, there are a number of different perspectives. The first one is human evolution. And human beings are early in their evolution. Basic first level of human evolution is the caveman or the narcissist perspective, which you take care of yourself and kill and eat and survive with your own wits. And the responsibility you have is just for your immediate family, for your spouse and children. That aspect is still prevalent in our culture. I would say 30% of people are functioning on that level. And even though they may have veneer of being moral, they're not moral in terms of the culture we live in. And yet people do admire them because they're tenacious and aggressive and pushy.
And often successful.
And often very successful because many of them become billionaires, and they don't have any value system which makes them treat people with respect or with care. The next level up is the tribal level. Human beings learned to plant vegetables and fruit and forage for those and do it as a community and protect each other and protect the community. This sense is tribal in the full sense of the word. It could be a religious tribalism, so maybe a major religion, could be a small group, but the basic tenets of it are that you survive as a group and you die as a group. The worst thing that can happen to an individual in this system is to actually be kicked out of the group. They won't survive. You can only survive as part of this tribal group. And we see a lot of that politically in our culture and socially, and either with us or against us.
And we see racial tribes, ethnic tribes, gender tribes. You know, people are identifying now with group identity at the species level. So what we're talking about now is humanity as a species rather than individuals.
Yes, so humanity is in its second planet, and we're about 60% of people live in this particular level of consciousness primarily. It's their development. So the next stage is individuation into independent thinking, so that you might have conservative values in some regard and liberal values in other regards. You might belong to a community, but not necessarily feel like you are controlled or identified fully with the community. You're a marginal member. But you think for yourself and you think as an individual. There's less people in this category than the previous one. And we kind of see that we're not choosing our presidents, our leaders, based on their superiority, intellectually, socially, liberally.
So what's the morality in this level of consciousness?
Morality is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the morality. It's a conscious ethical position, and many professions have this ethical value system. So
Meaning do no harm.
do no harm, care for the other, be compassionate. It's a value system that you aspire to.
And it's independent thinking, so it doesn't necessarily mean you don't question the ethics you're given. You may question them, the ethical code. And you also care for yourself. It's not only other-centered, right? We're not talking about codependency.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next step up is there's very few people in this level, is the heart level, where love thy neighbor as thyself is the key element, which is compassion, empathy, caring for all human beings, no matter what their race, creed, sexual orientation is. And there are not too many people who live in this level, and never mind the more evolved spiritual levels. Why is this important? It's important because, as one enlightened person told me, there's no morality in being awake. Once one actually lets go of the ego and finds oneself in cosmic awareness, there's no morality. There's no right or wrong at that level. It happens and things just spontaneously unfold. And if one has not developed morality or being identified with the body, emotions, mental, spiritual, human value system, these are not, as one person said, one enlightened person told me, I spent 15 minutes in ignorance. The rest of my life I've been awake, and I have no morality. I can do whatever I want to do. And it just happens.
Because the belief is that the happening or the spontaneous action is rooted in the source, in yoga, in pure consciousness.
Yeah, you cannot do any harm if you're awake, if you're enlightened. And that's an illusion. That's not true. And some religious practices have addressed this issue. In Buddhism, right speech, right action, right thinking addresses the issue, and
Or the Ten Commandments.
or the Ten
Or
Commandments.
the yamas and niyamas.
Correct. However, most of the spiritual practitioners bypass this. They move directly from third chakra, from a sense of independence and low morality, to transcendence, to let go of the ego and transcend, rather than develop the morality and the heart part of being a human being.
So how do you teach moral development from the inside out? People are not getting it from the outside in, from parents and clergy and doctrine. It's not being internalized. Then how do you transmit that from the inside out?
Transmit that, teach that.
Yes. In other words, this is a missing piece in our development.
I think it's important to stay focused on sense of separateness and develop the ego so that it's fully functioning, empathic, caring, moral, centered in caring for the self and others. So it's important to develop that before you transcend that, or include that as part of your spiritual awakening.
I mean, that's really what the field of transpersonal psychology tried to teach in the 1970s, was including psychological development and inner work with spiritual practice.
Right. So I was a psychologist. I'm a psychologist, and we have an ethical code that says do no harm. Treat the patient or the client as more important than yourself. Care for others, and as many principles of honesty and ethics and how you charge fees and so on. Those are all aspirational, and there are boards that govern those fields and try to get people to conform to that with some kind of discipline or punishment.
And yet you read the magazines, the professional journals, and you see how many people are violating the codes and getting their licenses revoked.
Yeah, it's a common problem, and those are the only people who get caught.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is people are not internalizing this. You know, Ken Wilber talks about lines of development. So they may have emotional, cognitive, or spiritual line of development that's advanced, but the moral line of development is missing.
Yes, and one needs to look at morality as a separate line of development, not as the same as waking up or reaching a higher level of consciousness. One needs to include that in development of human growth and human beings. You know, being a therapist is a good training, was a good training for me, developing compassion, empathy, caring, sense that all human beings are equal and not to reject. So the aspirational level was valuable in terms of building character.
So most people are not psychologists or counselors.
Mm.
And even people who are not internalizing the moral line of development. So how do we, because this is global, this issue.
Yeah,
It's not even just local.
We're living in a narcissistic age where there are more people in the first level of human development and the second level than in the third level.
Caveman and tribal.
Caveman and tribal, yeah. And bypassing the heart development, planetary awareness, people are treating the planet like an object, like it's there to be used.
So that's the fourth and fifth chakras.
Yeah, rather than even the sixth chakra is, which is the spiritual beings, are sort of eliminated from our world. We're a very materialistic culture right now.
So we get the problem, we get the framework that each of these levels of consciousness or stages of human development has a different morality, has a different set of rules, and behaves differently. The caveman doesn't behave like the conscious teacher or psychotherapist.
Yeah, the caveman morality is narcissism, is taking care of yourself and not anybody else, and just the immediate family. So the caveman morality is pure survival.
However, the caveman within, because as we transcend, we include the old stages of development. So if the caveman within gets activated, right, we can kind of see that with Trump every single day in the news, then that primitive, immoral or amoral part of us may act out in a harmful way. Same with the tribal part. Somebody may be in the process of individuating from a group and becoming independent, but there's a crisis, and so they default back to a tribal identity, right? And protect the church or the whatever the group is, the family. So this is a kind of a process that is complex. All of it is within each of us. All of it is within the body of humanity. And I hope that this just kind of gives you a bit of a map to dissect what you're observing these days in human beings.
In more advanced levels of consciousness, self and the other are not separate. And yet that doesn't translate into moral behavior because self and other are not consciously part of the heart, part of the moral development. So one could actually be quite advanced spiritually, where one sees others as part of themselves or loves others, cares for others, but not necessarily treats them well. Doesn't necessarily treat others as or the planet as part of itself.
Yeah, so a priest could have an experience of Jesus that's an authentic unity experience and yet molest a child.
Correct. So how do we actually move our society into a more moral position? It's really about understanding the levels of development and teaching our children values that are how they treat each other. And for example, ask your children, if you have them, would you like it if somebody treated you badly like you're treating them, your siblings or your parents? So that you start to train the caring for others inherent in caring for oneself. Try to build that framework.
How would you feel if you were that person who's being bullied?
Right. And the same thing with financially. Taking care of oneself financially, survival wise, it's really important in an ethical way. So following an ethical pathway is one in which one does no harm to others. And having a career or a job that is not oriented towards harming others is important. And at each level is development of that level. So if you're in a tribal sense, how does the tribal give to the rest of the world? How does it give to the rest of humanity? How does it give to, what's its development as a tribe? Does it allow people to separate and individuate out of the tribal mentality? Or does it hold them back and be punitive or be controlling?
And how about non-duality, morality and non-dual levels of consciousness?
There's no morality non-dual level because there's no sense of self either. There's a sense of non-duality means everything's the same. Everybody's part of the whole. And there are higher levels than that, but from a non-dual perspective, there's no morality invested there.
So if there's no self and other, and therefore no morality, it seems to me it's really important for those people to also maintain awareness of the duality.
Yes, for example, in Buddhism, the philosophy is that the higher you go, the more spiritually developed you are, the more your evil inclination grows as well. So the more propensity you have to do harm. So you have to be more diligent not to do harm, not to treat people badly, not less.
More light, more
So,
shadow.
so there's within these traditions, there's certainly a ground in opening the heart and being careful to be moral. However, the many people bypass these issues.
But I think the point that I wanted to make was if some of our listeners are experiencing some oneness states or non-duality, whatever name you give it, unity consciousness,
Emptiness.
that to also be aware that we live in a dualistic reality at the same time, to hold dual and non-dual awareness
Together.
So that we maintain an awareness of our impact on others, on the environment, on animals and people and the planet.
Right. It's not about transcending separateness and becoming one or becoming non-dual. It's about having both. And that's imperative in the development of consciousness.
Okay, thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you found our discussion insightful, there's a good chance your friends will too. And we'd love it if you could take a moment to share this episode with a friend who you believe would appreciate it. Help us spread the word and reach more people. And follow us on any platform. Turn on your episode notifications so you never miss new content. Thanks for being part of our podcasting journey.